Welcome to the Happy Market Research Podcast, your favorite place for strategies, stories, and insights from the world of market research. Brought to you by your host, Dan Fleetwood.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Happy Market Research Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dan Fleetwood, and today we have a very special guest, Brianna Sylver. Brianna is the founder and president of Sylver Consulting and also the recent author of Leading Through Freefall: How Innovators Turn Turbulence into Trust. So Brianna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation, Dan.
Awesome. So maybe give people a little bit of background, and as part of that, I would love to hear why you decided to write the book.
Sure. So just background-wise, so I lead Sylver Consulting, which is an innovation research and strategy firm. We're based out of the Chicagoland area, but do work all over the globe. We sit at the intersection of market research, user experience, and strategy, and really our work supports organizations to future-proof their brands and organizations and just lead transformation. Specifically, our work funnels into three different areas around enhancing brands. So looking at, your value proposition, why do you deserve to exist versus others in the industry, filling innovation pipelines, whether that's next gen or wholly new offerings, or even helping organizations think through what is a culturally sustainable innovation process for their organization. And then the third area is really aligning stakeholders around new visions for growth. And so that's really, kind of helping them to identify where do they need to go, what could they do, what are they willing to do, and then what's the accountability to make those things happen. And so that's what I've been spending the last couple decades doing, is supporting, largely Fortune 500 organizations, several Fortune 15 organizations in doing exactly that type of work. And so when it comes to why did I choose to write a book, is I've seen a lot over the years of, basically things get stuck, and they get stuck frequently. Where everybody's really jazzed and excited about making change. They may know in their hearts they absolutely need to make change in order to future-proof their business. And yet there's so much human dynamics that are underneath that change that needs to happen, that oftentimes sort of the grand vision that you set out to achieve ends up being a much watered down version when it comes to real-time implementation. And so what I've learned over the years is, for as much time as we spend talking about process and methodology and samples and all the things that are the work, that is really such a small portion of the true work that has to be done to support change. I mean, I would even wager to say that's maybe only 10 or 20% of the real work that needs to happen in order to actually support the change. And so that's what Leading Through Freefall is all about, is basically how do you start to address the human dynamics in and around your projects so that you can increase your impact and influence with the stakeholders and the teams that you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, the 10 to 15%, I tend to agree with you, honestly. I think it's an important 10 to 15%, but if you really want the change, you probably need to put in some of the techniques that you talk about in the book. So what are some of those? Like if I'm a insights, person at like a Fortune 500 company, I'm like, man, I just want change. What are some things that I can do to help me out with that process?
Yeah, so the book is set up as three separate sections, and I'll just take a minute and talk about those because I think it's a good map just in terms of thinking about project execution too. So the first section of the book it's called Suiting Up, and it's all the things that you can kind of predict, like the things that are just going to help your projects be set up for success. In some cases, those are things around like how to drive alignment among teams right from the start in terms of what you're trying to achieve and what success looks like once you arrive. And then in other cases, it's about sort of setting up like anchor points to kind of come back to as you move along in implementation to say, this is what we wanted to do, and are we actually doing what we said we wanted to do, or do we need to adjust mid-project in some form or fashion? So that's like, when you're first kicking off initiative, before it's even become an initiative, like there's some things to support with project scoping and all that, just sort of like set your project up for success. The middle of the book is called the free fall. And this is like all the stuff that happens as you're executing a project that, it's coming out of left field. You can't expect it. You don't anticipate it, but you kind of just got to deal with it when it's there. And it can be anything from, hard skeptics, blame storms that might be happening of like, you chose to bring in the wrong people. I'm not liking what I'm hearing in the insights. And so of course you recruited the wrong people to be in this study, stuff like that.
Yeah,
right. That it's like,
Yep.
how do you deal with that graciously and kind of support getting people back in line, like, getting the project back on a smooth course in some form or fashion. And then the third area is, okay, now you've got the insights and you got the recommendations. How do you support action against those? And so that's what we call the safe landing in the book around that particular point of view. And so there's different, tools and frameworks to really support how do you start to socialize and gain buy-in and implementation commitment towards those insights. Got
it. So if organizations don't have this framework, are they just learning it on their own, or is it kind of intuitive, or how? I guess it's not intuitive if you need these, different workshops and things. I'm just curious around, like, are these things like learned? Do people just know them, like in terms of how this functions within an organization? What have you found there?
I mean, I would say largely what I have found is that, some people who are more intuitively driven, they feel when the energy is off in a project.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to deal with it. So being conflict adverse, it's just kind of like, if I ignore it, it will go away. Well, most times that doesn't happen. What it means is that you get to the end of a project, and while you have quote unquote like met the success goals of the project in the sense that you've delivered the insight that they've asked you to deliver, you haven't delivered it in a way that's going to support action. And so one of the things in the insights industry that we always use, right, is like actionable insight. We want actionable insight. And most times when people are using that phrase in their mind, as that phrase exits their mouth, they are thinking end deliverable. But what I have found in my consulting practice of a couple decades is that's not actually true. Like, you have to really be thinking about how do you support the creation of actionable insights. And that has to start all the way at project scoping. And then there's ways in which you kind of engage intentionally and purposefully with stakeholders along the journey to ultimately create what gets encapsulated in a final deliverable and supports actionability. But if you only think about it as that final deliverable, you're missing the boat. And then, the socialization that has to happen after the fact, is even more above and beyond that. But I think that's a place where people go wrong. Now, is it hard? No, it's not hard, but it takes guts. So like, as you go into the various different tools and frameworks, there's 17 of them included in the book. There's moments when you're like, you want me to ask this question, Brianna? That feels super scary, right?
What's a question that they would ask?
For instance, one of the frameworks that I just absolutely adore, I use it like multiple times a day in all aspects of my life, is the 5 intention setting questions. And so like the 5 intention setting questions, you ask them in this specific order. And so you imagine yourself, I oftentimes ask them at project scoping, or when I'm in a project kickoff call, I'll be like, and you have to ask them in this order. And this is part of what makes people uncomfortable. Is what do you not want to have happen on this project? Like, what would be a complete, failure? So you get their thoughts on that. How do you not want to feel going through or coming out of this project? And people are like, I don't care how they don't want to feel. Like, that's not what I'm here to do. Right. Then you go to the positive of like, well, what do you want to have happen? Like, what would be like an ultimate success? And then what do you want to feel going through and coming out of this project? And then how do you want others to feel? And who are those others? And so those on face value, when I say just ask these to your stakeholders, they're like, I can't do that. Like that, to start with, like, what are I not like? What do you not want to feel, or what do you not want to have happen? I mean, that's almost like saying, I'm going to fail, so let's just get it out there. I'm like, no, it's not. It's giving them the space because they are already worried about this project failing. Like that is
Right.
just like, that's just a human instinct. They are worried about this project not delivering everything that everybody has specified that they would like for it to deliver. So allow them the space to put that out on the table first. Then when you get to what do they want to have happen and how do they want to feel, then with that kind of energy, that negative energy expended, now they're going to really step in to tell you what they really want, more from a dream and heart space. And that is not the type of energy that's been put onto an RFP form, right? So
Yeah, 100%.
you're really going to sort of like step into that space. And then when you say, okay, now who are the others? And those others can be a variety of different stakeholder groups. It could be, my executive team. It could be my customers. It could be my team members. It can be whomever, right? Depending upon the initiative. And then it allows them to project what would they want their feelings to be. And so these 5 intention setting questions, they really help to, one, get really clear around what success looks like. But particularly when used in project scoping, they can also really give you a sense of what also has to be included in your insights program. Because like, when I first started my career, and I think a lot of market researchers, like somebody comes to you and say, we need to study this, maybe focus groups is the right way to do it, maybe online qual, whatever it is, right? Or, quant study. And so you're spending all the time focusing on the insights. But when you do these 5 intention setting questions, you figure out all the other things that have to be around it from a stakeholder engagement perspective. In most cases, you need more than the project that you've been initially reached out to support. You need some additional workshops. Maybe you even need multiple phases of research to achieve ultimately the objectives. And then you can kind of craft a whole program that's going to support the ultimate outcomes that they are wanting versus sort of like dealing with it at face value. So I don't know if you're super into like healthcare landscape, but I think about it, the difference between going to like your traditional, like, Western medicine versus like a functional medicine doctor. Like, okay, you go in for the symptom, which is like whatever the insights program is, versus the functional medicine doctors. Like, let's get to the root of what's really going on here. And I think those 5 intention setting questions really sort of get to the root of what success ultimately looks like, so that you can make sure that you're designing a program that's going to deliver that and not just a partial answer.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Those intention setting questions, they're hard enough for like, I think, a person to answer on their own if they're being reflective, right? And then you ask it to the stakeholders. But you're 100% right. Like if you have those intention set questions, you've asked them, and then you get the answers, that really helps inform what the report should look like, how you should report on the results that you get. So it's not just, numbers in a PowerPoint with different charts. You can actually get at the root cause and the feelings and intentions behind it. So that's pretty genius, actually. As I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, these are hard questions to ask. But if you put in the hard work at the beginning, yeah. It's like, like get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And that's like
Absolutely.
kind of exactly what this is. And by doing it at the start rather than at the end, it does really help inform that. So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah.
In terms of what, you talked about leaders and stakeholders. What's a belief that you think more leaders should understand, or that they should realize that could help out, anyone that is underneath them?
In terms of like how to lead, is that what you're
Yeah, just in terms of how to lead, or even how to inform like these more actionable insights that we're all after. I mean, is there anything that comes to mind there?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's really about giving space. So, every framework and tool in this book is really about giving people the space to share their perspectives on things. because everybody has it, right? Like, it doesn't matter what level you are on a team, what your functional role is on the team. Everyone has contributions to offer, and they all have fears and concerns and anxieties that are showing up and driving in the ways in which they are behaving and operating as well. And so every tool in the book is really about giving a new way in to uncover the anxieties, the fears, the doubts that are really sort of driving behavior, so that then you're dealing with them on the table instead of sort of dealing with the reactions of people where you think you're dealing with something and that's actually not what you're dealing with. You're dealing with, something that's 3 layers underneath that, essentially, right? So the way that the book has been designed, in addition to the 3 sections, is that each chapter presents like a common challenge that you would experience as somebody in the insights and innovation space. And so it presents a common challenge. It illustrates that challenge through the course of a case study from my career. So, takes all different types of industries, all different types of projects. And then it presents you with a challenge. So how would you actually move through this challenge and, this issue? How could you kind of reframe it, sort of deal with it differently than how we might innately deal with it? And then it gives you a tool, a framework, a discussion prompt, a workshop script. And then actually then says, okay, if you take action, this is what you could expect to happen. And then ultimately, this is the mindset shift that you have to have in the process of execution. And so it's interesting because, we all get to those points where you're just feeling super overloaded, like everything's going wrong. You're like, my life sucks. Like, I want out of this. Right. And so in the process of writing this book, I had a lot of turbulent moments myself. And I had like one stretch of time. I mean, it went on for a while, like maybe 6 months, where it was just like, I just didn't feel like I could catch a break. And I went back to my own book multiple times where I was just like, what's the advice that I would have given myself in this situation? Right. And I was like, oh, you know what? I had lost sight of that. Let me try that and see if it helps us to get to a better position. So, I think it has value for anyone at any tenure, because there's just moments like when things are going haywire and sideways, like everybody can lose perspective. It doesn't matter if you're new to the field or you've been in it for decades. Right. And, but this book really helps to kind of just encourage you to pause and sort of broaden the aperture of perspective a little bit, so that then you can kind of go in with a refreshed mindset and, support helping people to navigate through whatever, the resistance to changes that's being experienced in that moment.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like how you referred back to the book. I mean, that's a great test of, right, hey, does this actually work? And you're like, yeah, it works well. So
it did give me some confidence, I will say that.
Yeah. I love it. So I know when we were chatting before, you had mentioned the 5 stages of grief and how that is also in the book in some way. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the big ahas for me as I was writing this book is that as people are posed with change, whatever change it is, they travel a curve that looks very similar to a grief curve. And so, the first step on that grief curve is denial, which in the case of our work, oftentimes either is a denial or resistance, where you get a lot of pushback of like, we don't really need to make change. Right. And then, and then after that, then you get into sort of that anger period, which is like, that's where the blame storming happens. So we've all been in those situations where you're in the middle of, running field work, and they don't like necessarily, your stakeholders are getting tripped up by what's coming back in the insights. Like, it's not favorable to whatever position they're trying to pursue. Right. And so the very first stop on that usually is like, we have the wrong people. how we got to find the right people. And so, they get into that anger space. And then it moves into like bargaining of like, well, how much change do we really need to make? Like, I know we have a list of 10 priorities. Can we make change to the thing that's in number 10 space on that list of ranked priorities versus spending time and energy on, things that are in rank 1 through 3, for instance. And then, you get into the space of, just like, feeling overwhelmed and depression and anxiety, which, in the case of, professional projects, it shows up more as like that overwhelm and anxiety, or just feeling like it's, defeated a bit in terms of being able to improve your situation, whether it's a market position or growth position, whatever it is. And then to the point where then people are really willing and ready to sort of start to, kind of experiment and make change, whether it's, just initial pilots to then start to look at, how could they scale versus just sort of saying, okay, we got to, make a net change and move forward. And so the reality is that every single project that we are running is traveling that grief curve. And it's just a matter of, what's the scale of the project and the people who are engaged. So, like a lot of the work that Sylver Consulting does is pretty transformational work. And so like literally every project is going through this, and you feel it as you're going through it, like you feel people on this curve. If it's something that's maybe not like super transformative, maybe it's not as pronounced. And then of course, there's people who have different levels who are comfortable with different levels of ambiguity. So they will travel at different rates as well. But the good news is that it's predictable because every project goes through it. So one thing that's been really fascinating for me since writing the book and sort of having this aha moment in the process of it is now being in spaces where you can see it actually happening. Like a couple months ago, we were facilitating a workshop, and like, it was super clear that some of the stakeholders in that workshop were really uncomfortable with just even being there. And so like for the first like 30 minutes, it was like avoidance tactic after avoidance tactic to start actually making traction on the agenda. Now, beforehand, I probably would have been very frustrated with that, but I could see it for what it was. And I could see it for where they were on the grief curve and the change curve. And so then it was just like, okay, how do I deal with this, in that position of grace? And it just got to the point where it's like, okay, we are in this workshop. We came in with this goal for today. We either need to start executing the agenda now in order to achieve that goal, or we need to just pivot midstream and say, that's not the goal of today's workshop. And we either decide to reschedule it some other time or we don't, right? And what it came down to is they were fearful they didn't have all the information to move forward. And I was like, you have the information, and the activities are going to help extract that information in a very, structured way that you're going to walk away with the outcomes that you want, but you have to trust me to move forward. And so ultimately, the stakeholders said, okay, fine, let's just move forward. And I'm going to trust the process. And we got done with it. And she was like, oh my gosh, that was like the best meeting I've had in like 6 months. Right. Like, but it was just like, she was so fearful coming in that she didn't have the information to come out with what she needed. And so, and it's not, she wasn't trying to be difficult. It's just like, it's just human nature. How many times have you procrastinated on taking action because you just like, you're resisting it. And then, you finally do it and you're like, oh, that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. Right.
No comment on that, Brianna. Sorry. No.
I know. I did this like yesterday. Okay.
Yeah. Right. No, that's funny. I like how you can identify, like you're in the workshop thinking, okay, you're at stage 3, eventually you'll get to 4, and then you'll be at 5, and then you'll be fine. Like, I like that. I'm also, I'm curious of, this change happens not only on a project level, but just with adoption of new technologies, right? I mean, it's no secret, like Gen AI has like hit the scene in the past couple of years. And I know that I'm thinking back, I can see these stages at companies that have adopted it. And it's like, at first it was like very resistant to now it's like, all right, maybe I should try this thing out. There might be something here. And then it's like, okay. And then, so it's interesting that you can apply this to a lot of different things, and not only projects, but also just general technology.
I mean, literally any change in your life, it
Yeah.
can be applied to. And it, big or small, but any change in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious in terms of like what you think about for like the future and like what excites you most about the next 3 to 5 years. If it's something to do with the book, that's great, or if it's just more in general in terms of the research industry. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the next 3 to 5 years, so one of the things, like, I guess just for my own company, that has been always a big part of our process, but I think it's growing even more in our
Hmm.
process, is really supporting people to translate the insights into action. And so, we do a lot of workshops as part of our work process in
Hmm.
support of that translation activity. But in the past year, we've had the opportunity to work with a Fortune 15 organization on really sort of revolutionizing the way in which they're approaching their B2B marketing for their process. They're moving more towards like a personalization approach.
Mm.
And, going back to my comment that, the insights are like, 10, 15, 20% maybe of the work. We did a bunch of the insights work to drive sort of the content needs associated with their B2B audiences, but we've spent a good chunk of the last 9 months maybe, and we've got more plans going forward, just socializing those insights throughout the organization and supporting different
Hmm.
cross-functional teams to hook into them in
Yeah.
ways that are relevant to, kind of what they do for the business, as well as then, supporting the organization from a strategic standpoint to mature into what does it look like to really approach marketing in this way, and sort of what are the processes that have to die so so other processes can be born to support that. And
Hmm.
so, I see for my own business, like really just leaning more into that, because that's when change happens, right? Like
Yeah.
if you only
Yeah.
develop the insights and kind of do a couple presentations, maybe one workshop, like it may never really hook in to really support that integration and activation in the full ways in which it could. So I'm excited about that. I mean, of course, AI is changing, kind of how we all do work, right?
Yeah.
And so, much like you just explained, like we certainly are, exploring what does that look like for our business in different aspects of our work as well. And so definitely, continued experimentation slash, like, full on implementation of the things that kind of work will 100%
Hmm.
be there. And I think, just sort of the sophistication of what's possible keeps evolving very
Yeah.
rapidly as well. But in terms of the actual kind of like, how is my practice changing and what am I excited about, I'm really just excited about all the different ways that we're expanding what does actionability really truly look like.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it makes sense, especially in this day and age. And I think one thing that when you said like adaptability, I think with AI and the onset of that, and I mean, in like this industry, sometimes people are laggards, right, in terms of
Yeah.
adopting new technology and getting up to speed with things. But it feels like with AI and Gen AI in the past couple of years, it's been different. I haven't seen like technology in the past, like I'd say 20 years, that people have adopted so quickly into their workflows, and almost like like a FOMO, like I'm going to miss out if I don't jump
Yeah,
on this.
that's true.
It's I'm kind of curious around. Do you think that helps out with people just being more, I guess, with people being more like just less resistant to change, for lack of a better term there? Or do you think people are still people and they'll still not like change?
I think people are still people. So with AI these days, you can get answers a lot
Hmm.
quicker than you could do before, right? Like you can
Yeah.
generate, content, way faster,
Hmm.
process content way faster than you could prior.
Hmm.
However, I don't think necessarily speed of having content there supports the ways in which people's behaviors have to change to
Hmm.
support the actionability. Like that has not sped up.
Got it. Yeah,
So,
makes
I
sense.
think like there's a perspective of like, well, I can get you the information faster, so you should be able to make this change faster. And it's like that the second half of that hasn't changed, because people are people and systems are systems. And every change that you make requires, moving people within a system, and habits and behaviors and assumptions and all these other things that have to be dismantled and sort of, realigned as a result of that. So I think that's oftentimes a myth that that is not, it just is so far. I mean, unless we all become robots, I don't know that that's going to change.
That's a good point. Yeah.
If they put a chip that we all kind of like, support alignment, maybe, but I don't think we're going to necessarily speed up the pace of change. In some respects, we may actually be even slowing it down to some degree, because I think there's just a surface level processing that's hard for people to do with just the pace of which things are being generated. I think the insights industry, we're going through people are trying to decide what it is. So like the ways in which we've introduced AI in our workflow, they're really intentional about where do they help us to, drive efficiency, drive standardization, stuff like this, right? But I think back to like, I don't know, maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago in the insights industry, where we went through the sort of the DIY boom, right? Where there was like DIY tool, this, that, and everything. And they were marketed to, stakeholders as this is instant insight. And largely speaking, it wasn't instant insight, right? It was instant summarized thoughts. But that doesn't necessarily, a summarized thought is not an insight. And so, kind of we went through a period of, I don't know, maybe 18 months, 2 years where, certainly my organization felt that, right? Because they were like, we don't need you. Like, all we need is this like magic software and it will have an instant insight, right? And then as people started to use those tools, they realized it was more summarized thoughts versus instant insight. And, and then, just, I think the use cases for those tools became very clear versus the use cases when you would want, more of like a full market research organization to sort of work with you. Yeah, and I think like we're going through a similar time with AI, right? So I think like the groups that are developing like fully on AI tools and they're coming out and marketing them as instant insight once again. And they're still not instant insight. They're maybe better summarized thoughts than they were before. And certainly if you can put in content from the organization that you're trying to like influence in some form or fashion, I think it's definitely better. But it's still not, it's not instant strategy. Like that's what they want now, right? Instead of instant insight, instant strategy, still not instant strategy. Is it further ahead? Yeah, probably. But I think the groups that are, at least the applications that we have experienced, as well as the applications that I'm hearing of other market research and insights organizations putting in, the ones that are not necessarily about trying to like create the outcome instantly, but more about like really supporting and plugging gaps in process along the way and efficiency. I think those are the ones that seem to be really delivering the most value in return, at least from my perspective and my team.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love your quote there. A summarized thought is not an insight. I think that's like, it's so powerful. Like it's so succinct, but powerful. So I love that. So as we start to close out here today, I have one more question for you in terms of what's one idea from leading through Freefall you hope people apply?
Yeah, I think that the big thing that I want people to understand is that in their role is not just to manage process, it's to manage the emotional energy of their stakeholders around their project. And so they really need to become attuned to when is alignment in the team and when is there feelings of unease, anxiety, doubt that really are better to be surfaced. And then the entire book is basically 17 tools to support you in surfacing sort of that, festering energy that'll take your project out and basically make it less impactful, and giving you the empowerment of, okay, how do we just like meet everybody where they are and bring this out into the light so that we can really truly move forward with, strength and impact and influence.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. So, Brianna, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find more about you? Where can they find the book? And where would you want to point them if they want more information?
Yeah, so they can find me on LinkedIn, very prevalent there. So would, very much encourage and welcome a connection. So that's Brianna, Brianna, and Sylver, Sylver. In terms of the book, you can buy the book wherever, books are sold online. I can certainly, share the Amazon link specifically with you, Dan, to put into the show notes.
Yep.
And then, one thing I'd like to offer to your audience is just a free chapter download. If they're like, that sounds interesting and I'd like to learn a little bit more before I commit. And so I can provide in the show notes for you, a chapter download too. That then they can just go do that and they'll get chapter 1 for the book and can kind of give it a read and see if that's something they might want to, embrace as a full read going forward.
That's awesome. No, thank you. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening today. And check out Brianna. A lot of her work is on LinkedIn. I know she posts quite a bit and it's very interesting. And make sure you check out the book too. And if you like this episode, share it with someone. That's my ask of you today. So Brianna, thanks again for coming on and look forward to catching up with you soon.
I so appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much, Dan.
All right. Thank you.